The ripple effect, how one woman's vision can transform communities. Have you ever wondered what happens when someone decides to use their expertise not just for themselves, but for an entire community? When I recently sat down with Nancy Ume, I witnessed firsthand the extraordinary power of what I called the ripple effect, that magical moment when one person's vision creates waves of transformation that touch countless lives. Nancy Ume isn't just a registered nurse. She isn't just a public health consultant. She isn't just a chef or an entrepreneur. She is the embodiment of what happens when purpose meets passion, when expertise meets empathy, and when one woman decides that her community deserves better. In a world obsessed with individual success, Nancy stands as a testament to the power of collective transformation, a beacon of hope showing us that sometimes the most profound revolutions begin not with grand gestures, but with a simple pot or pan. I want to take you on a journey today, a journey about transformation, about the courage to see problems others ignore, and about the audacity to believe you might just be the solution your community has been waiting for. Because here's what I've learned after speaking with Nancy: sometimes the most profound revolutions don't begin with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Sometimes they begin in the kitchen. And isn't that just perfectly ironic? The space historically used to confine women has become the launching pad for one of the most inspiring health movements I've encountered. Imagine this: you're a healthcare professional who understands intimately the connection between what we consume and how we live. You see families, particularly in Black communities, struggling with preventable health conditions. You notice cookware in homes leaching toxic chemicals into food. And instead of simply lamenting this reality, you think, I can change this. That's exactly what Nancy Ume did when she founded Radiance Cookware. I saw a problem that was literally making people sick, Nancy told me during our conversation. And I realized that my unique position, understanding both healthcare and cooking, meant I had a responsibility to do something about it. But let's be honest, starting a business isn't easy, especially when you're asking people to reconsider something as fundamental as the pots and pans they've been using for generations. It's like asking someone to question whether they've been breathing correctly all their life. The resistance is almost instinctual. Nancy faced skepticism. She encountered logistical nightmares trying to scale internationally. She had to convince consumers that this wasn't just another product. This was about their health, their families, their futures. And you know what? She succeeded. Today, Radiance cookware is used by families across Nigeria, the UK, the US, and Canada. But the cookware itself, that's just the beginning of the story. Because Nancy understood something profound: products don't change communities, knowledge does. The pots and pans were simply her entry point into a much deeper conversation about health, wellness, and self determination. So she began creating educational content about safe cooking practices. She leveraged social media, not just to sell products, but to build trust through transparency. She grew an audience of over 2 million followers across platforms, teaching them about healthy recipes, lifestyle choices, and motherhood. This is what I find most remarkable about Nancy's journey. She didn't just identify a problem and create a solution, she built a movement that says your health matters, your family's health matters, and you deserve both the information and tools to protect what matters most. Now, I want to pause here and ask you something. What expertise do you have that others might need? What unique perspective do you possess that could solve a problem others don't even recognize yet? What if the very thing you take for granted about yourself is exactly what your community is desperately searching for? Because that's the first lesson I learned from Nancy Ume. Your expertise isn't just for you, it's a gift meant to be shared. And sometimes the most valuable expertise isn't what you learned in school, it's what you learned through living. But sharing expertise isn't always enough. Sometimes transformation requires something deeper, something more personal. Sometimes it requires us to transform our deepest pain into purpose. Let me tell you about another Nancy whose story illuminates this truth. After losing her sister, Susan G. Komen, to breast cancer, Nancy Brinker made a promise that would eventually become the world's largest breast cancer education and fundraising organization. When Brinker began her work, breast cancer was whispered about in hushed tones. There was stigma, there was shame, there was woefully inadequate research funding. Women were dying in silence, their suffering compounded by society's discomfort with discussing women's bodies and health. But grief transformed this woman. It metamorphosed her from a bereaved sister into an international leader against breast cancer. Her personal tragedy became a catalyst for global change. She created high profile fundraising events like Race for the Cure. She pioneered cause related marketing partnerships between nonprofits and businesses. She raised hundreds of millions for research and increased global awareness about early detection and treatment options. Her impact was so profound that she became one of Time's 100 most influential people and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. But here's what strikes me most about Brinker's story. She didn't just raise money, she changed the conversation. She made it possible for women, particularly Black women who are disproportionately affected by late stage diagnoses due to systemic barriers to access resources they desperately needed. She transformed a whisper into a roar, and in doing so, saved countless lives. This is the second lesson I've learned. Transformation often begins with personal pain channeled into public purpose. Our wounds, when properly tended, can become well springs of healing for others. Now, I recognize that not everyone has experienced the kind of profound loss that Nancy Brinker did, but we've all faced challenges. We've all encountered obstacles. We've all had moments where we thought, this shouldn't be this hard. Those moments, they're invitations to consider how your struggle might become someone else's solution, how your hard won wisdom might spare another the pain you endured, how your story, in all its messy glory, might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to feel less alone. But what if your expertise isn't in health or advocacy? What if your path to impact seems less clear? What if you're currently in a role that feels disconnected from any greater purpose? This brings me to our third story, a powerful example of career reinvention that resonates with so many of us who felt trapped in roles that no longer serve our highest purpose. Imagine spending years climbing the corporate ladder, building teams, managing projects, earning accolades, and then one day realizing this isn't it. This isn't where I'm meant to make my mark. That's exactly what happened in our third example. After years in corporate leadership, this professional made the bold decision to leave it all behind with no backup plan to pursue entrepreneurial freedom. The transition wasn't easy. There were no safety nets, no guarantees, no certainty about market reception. There were sleepless nights and moments of paralyzing doubt. There were friends and family members questioning this seemingly reckless pivot. There was the terrifying realization that success was no longer defined by someone else's metrics, but by their own. But there was something more powerful than all those fears combined: transferable skills, cultivated resilience, and community support. There was the exhilarating discovery that leadership skills honed in a corporate environment could be repurposed for social impact, that project management expertise could be applied to building something meaningful from scratch, that the very structures they once felt confined by had actually been preparing them for this moment of liberation. Today, this individual mentors aspiring entrepreneurs through digital storytelling and social media engagement, showing others, especially Black professionals and business leaders who may feel boxed in by tradition or risk aversion, that it's possible to reinvent yourself at any stage. This brings me to the third lesson: the skills you've developed in one arena can become your superpower in another. Nothing in your journey has been wasted. Not the detours, not the dead ends, not the jobs that drained your soul or the relationships that broke your heart. It's all material for your masterpiece. So often, we compartmentalize our experiences. We think that was my corporate phase, or that was when I worked in healthcare, or that was before I had children. But what if we saw our lives not as separate chapters, but as a continuous accumulation of wisdom? What if every role you've ever played, every challenge you've ever faced, every skill you've ever mastered was preparing you for your next evolution? Because here's what I believe after speaking with Nancy Ume and studying these transformative journeys: we are never just one thing. We are complex, multifaceted beings with the capacity to reinvent ourselves again and again in service of our communities. The registered nurse becomes a cookware entrepreneur. The grieving sister becomes an international health advocate. The corporate leader becomes a mentor for aspiring business owners. And you, what might you become? As we begin to wrap up our time together, I want to return to Nancy Ume's story because there's something about her journey that encapsulates everything we've discussed today. Nancy's unwavering dedication has resulted in tangible milestones: establishing a successful business in non toxic cookware, building a global audience, empowering future generations with tools for healthier living. But perhaps most importantly, she's inspired other Black entrepreneurs, especially women, to pursue purpose driven businesses that uplift their communities. This is what happens when you decide that your expertise, your pain, your journey isn't just for you. This is what happens when you recognize that true strength lies not in hoarding knowledge, but in sharing it generously. This is what happens when you understand that transformation is never just about changing yourself, it's about creating the conditions for others to change too. I challenge you today: look at your life, look at your expertise, look at your struggles, look at your triumphs, and ask yourself, how might this serve others? How might my journey become someone's roadmap? How might my voice become someone's courage? Because the world doesn't need more people focused solely on their own success. The world needs more Nancy Umes, more individuals willing to see beyond themselves to the communities that shape them and the communities they can shape. Your ripple effect starts now, not tomorrow when you have more resources, not next year when you have more clarity, not someday when you feel more ready. Now, with whatever you have, wherever you are, take that first step, share that expertise, transform that pain, reinvent that career, build that movement, because somewhere out there, someone is waiting for exactly what only you can give. And their transformation, their ripple effect depends on yours. Thank you.